Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be building another interesting aircraft in the Indian Air Force inventory. I'll be using the Italeri 1/72nd scale Jaguar E kit for this, and I will be building the Jaguar IB, which is the two-seat conversion trainer for the Jaguar fighter. Now, as you can see at the back of the box, there is some information about Italeri and also about the Jaguar. On one edge of the box, you find the three other Italeri models, which are the Tornado, the Mirage 2000D, and the F-16. On the other edge, again, you have the Italeri information and some information about the Jaguar E. However, the Jaguar IB is a little different from the Jaguar E, but the airframe is pretty much similar. It also contains a call out for the colors from Model Master, but since I will be building a Jaguar IB of the Indian Air Force, my color scheme will be the Tipnis Grey. So a look at the contents of the box. These are the sprues, and let me bring you a close-up on, and you can see these amazing recessed panel lines out here in the nose section, in the gear bay section, and also on the control surfaces like the elevators and the wings. Beautifully recessed panel lines, and that's primarily the reason why I bought this kit. Here's a look at the cockpit, and you can see that it's pretty detailed. It's got some good switches and dial details. And here's the clear part. It comes in 4 sections for the front and the rear canopy. That's the foldable instruction sheet, followed by the decals, which are hiding inside the instruction sheet. Here's a close-up of the decals, very nicely printed, and they're printed by Italeri itself. I'll be using the common decals, and for the Indian Air Force ones, of course, I'll be printing them at home. So I began the build with the assembly of the ejection seat. There are 2 ejection seats here, the front and the rear ones, and they basically assemble as 2 halves of the main ejection seat, followed by the ejection handle detail, followed by the control columns of the front and the rear cockpit. At this point, it was a bummer because I forgot to press the record button, and I couldn't get any footage recorded for the painting of the instrument panel and the cockpit. But here is whatever footage I could record, and that is the completed seats, the instrument panel, and the cockpit floor. I then moved on to the assembly of the nose section, and I cut it out from the sprues and painted the cockpit black. Once that was done, the instrument panel was added inside the cockpit floor, and the seats also assembled within the cockpit tub. And here's a look at the final finished cockpit. Once that was done, I assembled the cockpit floor inside the 2 halves of the front section of the nose, and then closed up the 2 halves of the nose. Although there are no locator pins here, but the alignment is pretty good. Needs just a little bit of wiggling around and you can get it to align nicely. I then started off with the assembly of the latter half or the rear half of the fuselage and the assembly of the engine and the afterburners, and this is where I faced a lot of issues. However, you see that the fit of the two halves is excellent, but just look at how many attempts it took me to fix this. So going by the instructions, I had 10 failed attempts to align the afterburner with the rest of the fuselage. So I had to think of something different, and what I did was I glued the front section of the afterburners to the main fuselage and then aligned the rear section within the fuselage. And here you can see me connecting the nose with the rear part of the fuselage and moving on to the assembly of the wings and the other control surfaces. The wing fences required a little bit of flash cleanup, but they aligned pretty nicely over the top of the wings. The assembly of the air intakes was a reminder of how Hasegawa approaches the assembly of the MiG-27 air intakes. The fit of the wing on the upper section of the fuselage was amazing. However, it did leave a big gap on the rear section where it attaches to the fuselage, and I realized that that gap would have to be filled with a lot of filler. The Indian Jaguar trainers either do not have the gun ports on the left and the right side or have a single gun port, so I went with the single gun port assembly on the left side of the fuselage. I had decided to go for a wheels up configuration on this model. However, the kit gear bay door covers were very badly made and did not fit, so I had to resort to Fevicryl Mold-It, which is also known as Shilpkar, which basically works like a two-part epoxy putty. It's got resin and a hardener, so you mix equal quantities of the resin and the hardener to create a soft kind of putty, and then you shape it and remove the excess, as you can see here, and with a little bit of water you can smoothen it out and leave it for about 2 hours to cure, and it dries rock hard. Another good part about the kit is that it comes with a wide assortment of weapons like the magic missiles, the rocket launchers, the ECM chaff and flare dispensers, the Sea Eagle missiles, and the drop tanks. The assembly of the drop tanks was pretty straightforward. I joined the two halves of the drop tank together and simply placed it on the hard points like so, and they fit perfectly. I spent quite a considerable time filling those small gaps on the underside and on the top of the fuselage. As you can see here, the assembly of the afterburner with the fuselage needed a lot of filler to kind of smoothen it out and have a smooth finish on the surface, and also here on the top side where the wing joins to the fuselage. Now let's talk about another good thing that Italeri did, which is to include these two different types of vertical stabilizers. As you can see, the one on the left is the oldest one, which was present on the initial batch of the Jaguar E's or the Jaguar IBs, and the one on the right, which I will not use, is the one that is more recent, but I am going for a Darin 2 upgrade, so I will have to modify this one. The idea being to make a cut right here at the panels using my handy dandy plastic cutter. Basically, I went ahead and started scoring right on top of the panel. Multiple scores were required, and finally I was able to cut it out, and the final idea was to replace this portion with a new section which will depict the Terran 2 radome or antenna that houses the electronic countermeasures and a few other dielectrics. I then took the measurement of the thickness of the section that was cut out, and of the same thickness I cut out a piece of plastic from the spare plastic that I have lying around, and I formed this little bar here, and the idea was to then stick this bar shaped structure on top of the lower section of the empennage and have the upper section align on top of it, and with a lot of putty work and glue, the idea was to smooth it out and give it the shape of the dielectric antenna or radome, as you can see here. Finally, once that tedious task was over, it was time to place the pilots in. I placed a pilot with the orange overall, which is what the usual instructors of the Jaguar squadrons wear, and the backseat pilot, of course, was the one in the green overalls. I then began another tedious task, which is that of masking the 4 pieces of the canopy, and I used Tamiya masking tape to detail the edges and then covered up the rest of it with more Tamiya masking tape. I then placed the various 4 pieces of the canopy in their proper positions and then glued them on with a little bit of white glue. After cleaning up the entire body of the model with isopropyl alcohol, I moved on to spraying Avro SP89, which is a gray tone, and this gray tone is the exact gray tone that matches most of the Tipnis gray aircraft in the Indian Air Force scheme. I then took a black Sharpie to detail the edges of the air intakes, the wing leading edges, the leading edges of the horizontal stabilizers and the vertical stabilizer, which is a prominent feature on the Jaguars. Once done, it was time to detail the tips of the drop tanks, and I've simply used Fevicryl black here and detailed it with a fine tip brush. Another piece of detail that had to be painted was the gun on the gun port, and I used a custom mix of Fevicryl black, red and a little bit of blue to get this reddish brown tone, and I detailed the gun on the port side of the fuselage. It was then time to remove the masking from the canopy. As you can see, the overall look is pretty satisfactory, and so I decided to go ahead with some polishing with Tamiya fine and finish polishing compounds. So I started off with the fine one. I took a little bit of the cream on a cotton Q-tip, buffed it into the canopy section to remove the scratches, and then used the finish one to do the same process all over again and once it was buffed, it gave a very lovely shine to the finished canopy. Finally, as a step to apply the decals or the markings on the surface, I had to first spray Future, which is a gloss coat, and I liberally sprayed it all over the body of the model. The decals were finally printed at home, and I used my standard procedure of applying the decals. And at this point you notice that the fin flash kind of started falling apart, but I was able to salvage it and fix it back into position. And then the tail number, which was also printed at home, it went on pretty nicely, and so did the roundels on the top and the lower surfaces of the wings. I decided to go ahead with a mild bit of weathering using Camel Soft Pastels, and I used a dark brownish color, scraped off some of the dark brown pigment into a container, added some drops of water to it to dilute it a little, and then added 2 or 3 drops of the dishwashing liquid to break the surface tension of the pigment, and then applied the mix liberally within the panels. And as you can see, the custom mix is flowing very nicely into the panels. And finally, when it was dry, I used a kitchen towel to wipe off the excess in the direction of flow of air on top of the wings. And after everything was done, the final paint job was sealed within a gloss coat of Future, which was applied liberally over the entire surface of the model. And that brings us to the end of the assembly and painting of the model. And here are the final beauty shots of the finished Jaguar IB of the Indian Air Force. As you can see, the model has turned out pretty good. The details have come out pretty nicely. The Tipnis grey color has also come out very nicely, and so has the shine in the cockpit and the canopy. So thank you very much for watching this video till the end. I hope you enjoyed watching me build the model as much as I enjoyed building the model myself. If you liked the video, please click the thumbs up. Don't forget to click the bell icon for all future notifications. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Take care. Stay safe.